As you know, the development of high tech is impossible, can't be imagined without internet and digital infrastructure, without sustainable development of these, and also the communication. Traditionally, in general, we are used to see communication ministries, communication transport ministries in our government, but along with the development of technologies, of course, the government structures should also develop, and their functionality also should expand and change. That is why in the result of the previous governmental modification and change initiatives, we could say we created a new ministry in Armenia, which is titled the Ministry of High-Tech Industry, and it includes also the sector of communication and digital technologies. Actually, we have integrated the communication technologies into digital infrastructure. And this whole process of digitization as digital infrastructure, we mean as the communication systems, as substructures, as the data centers, and optic fiber means, communication means, etc. I'd like to say also that taking into account the fact that Armenia is actually occupying a serious position in the sphere of communication in the whole this geographic territory, we have 4GL connection. Besides, all our cities and many settlements do have fiber optic connection, cable connection. Nevertheless, we do not consider that everything is good, taking into account the current drastic developments going on in the world. We are planning in Armenia to implement a new program. As of now, we are in the process of discussing it together with our colleagues and planning it. That is going to be a program for providing communication, connection, fiber optic connection to all villages of Armenia. This is a project about which we shall have feasibility analysis and assessment at the end of the year, and will announce the launching it. Well, taking into account the fact that this sphere is really very liberalized, and at least for the part of the internet, there are numerous players in the market. Their role and their significance is also very important, so everybody is important. And here we have participation of the Union of Operators, and also we enjoy here the presence of our international partners, which all of this is very significant. I want to say that we are not underestimating the role of the communication infrastructures. Moreover, more than that, we understand that if we would not have these infrastructures, it would be impossible to have leap development in the sphere of high technologies. Once again, I want to welcome all participants of the forum. I want to wish you productive discussions, and I hope that we shall leave this place with a kind of sequence of concrete steps in our minds, knowing well what are we going to do next, what steps we are going to undertake from the point of view of developing the communication infrastructures and digitization of our industries. Thank you very much. I wish you productive discussions.
Hi, we are Crisp AI. We use AI to mute the background noise in audio and video calls. In a very short span of time, a lot of teams around the world, from companies such as Salesforce, HubSpot, Zapier, GitLab, have become users of Crisp.
Pixart uses artificial intelligence to transform images and make them more creative and beautiful. We also harness AI to predict user preferences and behavior, to provide personalized content and relevant experience for each member of our community.
Amaros is an AI-powered mobile platform for instant and accurate diagnosis of eye diseases. The platform, which integrates Amaros camera, assists physicians to eliminate potential blindness.
Engine is a technology provider company in the field of artificial intelligence. Our software frameworks and intellectual properties are enabling our customers to research, develop, and deploy deep learning-based systems for different industrial applications.
At Render Forest, which is an online video creation platform, we have implemented AI and machine learning algorithms to help our customers convert their video scripts into beautiful-looking animations.
At Intellinair, we developed an application that helps farmers monitor their fields. The application analyzes aerial imagery of the fields and alerts farmers of problems and potential problems that might affect their yield.
Testify brings a range of revolutionary solutions to the chess world. Our unique computer vision technology allows finding relevant YouTube videos from chess positions. We are now working on AI-based personal chess trainer to disrupt chess learning experience.
Web Fontaine, with the biggest R&D office located in Yerevan, is a provider of solutions for trade facilitation, powered by the world-class technologies, including artificial intelligence. Our e-government solution include single window system for trade, risk management, cargo tracking system, e-payment and more.
Disperse is using AI to help build skyscrapers. So the construction industry has actually been getting less efficient over the last 20 or 30 years. But with Disperse, we can analyze buildings as they're being constructed and use computer vision and artificial intelligence to understand what's going on and what status the building is in.
Scylla. It's an AI-based protective suite that analyzes the video feed from surveillance cameras. Upon detection of threat, it distributes the alerts to response units through our web and mobile channels, providing information on location and identity of suspect.
At Teamable, we believe in referrals. We offer a referral hiring platform that leverages companies' collective social networks. Our AI algorithms go beyond just matching relevant candidates to jobs. We are providing the option to specifically suggest diverse candidates.
Xero applies AI to the most pressing operational challenges of the legal industry, such as email management and timekeeping. We leverage machine learning to fully automate email filing into document management system and automate time entry creation into timekeeping system.
In SuperAnnotate, we are creating AI-assisted tools for image, video, and LiDAR annotation in order to ease the pain of the most tedious part of the computer vision. With our products, we're providing both software and services for companies such as autonomous driving, retail, aerial imagery, and security and surveillance, etc.
At Yerevanen, we do research in machine learning. Currently, we focus on semi-supervised learning when the amount of available labeled data is limited. Previously, we worked on text mining from biomedical literature and applied deep learning on electronic health records from US hospitals.
FimeTech is AI-oriented software development consulting company. We have delivered such projects as recommendation system, emotion recognition from human voice, AI developer platform, interpositioning system, etc.
In Labs AI, we provide personalized recommendation engine for user behavior analysis and content annotation. We provide end-to-end solutions from software development to AI integration into the existing systems.
Develando is an artificial intelligence innovation lab specialized in building early-stage companies and game-changing AI solutions in the areas of banking, insurance, telecommunications, and defense.
DeepCraft is an R&D lab specialized in AI. We provide full-cycle solutions in text, image, and signal processing. One of our recent projects is high-throughput threat detection system based on radio frequency signal processing. We bring our customers' ideas alive.
At Volvo, we believe that AI is the today. During the last few years, we have invested in automation and artificial intelligence to create the services for our partners. Specifically, we are working in the image processing and deep learning to create the maximum accuracy in machine vision problems.
SmartGrid builds augmented technology software as a service platform for the companies to design, develop, and deliver enterprise-grade AI solutions. We create computer vision projects in the areas of facial recognition, object detection, object classification, pattern detection, and etc. We help companies to collect and analyze the data to make the best use of it.
Everybody knows that we are smart, and we have to be proud of our intelligence and smartness and all the rest. Indeed. Okay, thank you very much. Let's pass the floor to our other keynote speakers, and it's not incidental that we say that in the internet there are organizations which we call internet starlets, and we are going to introduce the first one of these starlets, Yoran Marbi, director of ICANN.
Good morning. I will try to speak. I have to give a compliment to the translator. What a fantastic job you've done this morning. So first of all, I would like to say thank you. This is my first time in Armenia, and I have to say that I've been treated very well, and I want to come back again. So thank you, Minister, for inviting me. This is more than my expectations. You have a beautiful and fantastic country. I also learned how to drink your vodka yesterday, so if my voice is a little bit, yes, I'm a small Swedish person. I like forums like the N2 forums, when different parts and different systems comes together and talk. We don't do that enough. And I think this is a very good example of what the minister talked about, how to cooperate and work together and actually having under the same roof a lot of the discussions. There is someone laughing at me upside, am I? Okay. I'm here mostly for the European DNS Forum. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about it a little bit later. But first I would like to, does anyone know what ICANN does? Raise your hand, my team, don't. There's one down there. Oh, a couple. So ICANN is an organization. We are about 20 years old. And actually every time you go online, you hit about something that originates from us. We, together with our technical partners, provide the world with IP addresses, domain names, and all the identifiers, which is one of the pillars of the internet. We're in a Californian non-profit organization. We're part of what is really that makes the internet possible for all of you. And we do that as a service to the world. And it's, when you think about the internet as it is, you often think about the application you're using on the internet. But every time you want to go into a social media platform, you want to use one of those applications, you use an identifier to get there. And we are the organization who provides you with that. There are many stories to tell us about that. Actually, next week, we have a celebration in the office where three of the inventors of all of this comes to our office and celebrates. It's now 50 years ago. Since this thing was invented. It's an honor to have them there, of names you never heard of, most of you, Windsurf, Kleinrock and Steve Crocker. These are the people that actually makes all of this possible. But I want to share that when you talk about internet today, there are many things that is not positive. You talk about things like fake news, you talk about illegal content, you talk about all of that, but you have to remember that is actually not the internet. What we talk about in ICANN and together with our colleagues in RIPE, in ISOC, and ITF is the actual underpinnings of the internet. There is a big difference between the platforms of top of the internet and the actual internet. And often when I speak to legislators and other ones, I want to point out there's a big difference. So when legislative initiatives around the world doesn't hurt the ability for people to connect. You might think that the internet is done. It's there, everybody has it. What do we need to do more? But it's not. About half of the world's population doesn't have access to internet. And the other thing, what they don't have, is a local internet. We spend a lot of resources and we need our communities to work with us to make sure, for instance, you can localize internet for scripts that are local. So people who get access to the internet can do it on their own terms to make sure that the information that they reach is local rather than global. This is something we need help from everybody around the world to do. There are also security issues. We have to continue to develop, in our case, the DNS system to make them secure and make sure that it works as well as it's done for the last 50 years. These and many other things we are going to talk about for the next couple of days. Now, I want to thank you again for inviting me. It was a real pleasure to be here, and I will be back. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm back. I'm back, dear colleagues, compatriots, and this star has come to us from far away United States of America. But we have another star who has come from much closer place, and that star is our Axel Pavlik, the managing director of RIPE NCC. Dear Axel Jan, please, the floor is yours.
Not that far away, but still was a long flight in the middle of the night. Good morning. My name is Axel Pavlik. I head the RIPE Network Coordination Center. And coordination is an interesting word. We do all sorts of things. We do allocate internet numbering resources. That's maybe the most visible thing of what we are doing and most talked about, because we have run out of IPv4 space. But apart from that, we do measurements, we have large data sets, and we talk about them. We transfer knowledge out into the world. We do trainings. And the third part of our mission statement speaks about bringing people together and communities and stakeholder groups. So this is why we are here and why we find this kind of event so great, and we are very enthusiastic about these things. Because coming out of the rather technical area of building internet, operating little bits of the internet, we see over the last 15 years and longer maybe, that as the internet was so successful, is so successful still, we see interest from governments, regulators, law enforcement, police force, standing at our doors and wanting to understand what we are doing, how we are doing things, and how they can contribute. So this is also why we are here, and we are very happy to have the minister here as well. And we talked a little bit earlier this week already. I went to the WCIT conference, which is a little bit outside of my comfort zone. It's not just the internet geeks there. And Vahan was so friendly to drag me through a lot of interviews. And okay, I'm happy to give interviews if I can answer the questions. But one of the questions was invariably, so what do you think about the potential of Armenia? That is the question that I cannot easily answer, because there are so many possible answers and I need much more data for that. But we have seen some presentations already, and last week we see, earlier this week, we've seen many panels, and I was shown to a institution in town where young people at school can pace themselves through adult education at their own pace on creativity and IT base. So that was very nice to see. So what I usually say to that question is, well, I'm here for the third time, and that has a reason. I came many years ago, and I had no expectation of Armenia and the people I would meet, probably nice people. And yes, there were nice people, but also what really struck me at the time, and still I find quite interesting, is that there was already at the time a very active core of very enthusiastic people working together across community boundaries, bringing operators together. Internet Society was there. We came in as well, and this is something that we very much like and support. And so, yeah, that's the reason that we're here again, connecting people, connecting communities, teaching, meeting our RIPE NCC members, of course, as well. We'll have lunch later. We do the banking workshop there as well, teaching the banking industry things that we know and they think is useful for them. So happy to be here. It's my third time in town. Also, I went beyond the city borders and went out into the countryside. Yesterday, that was also very interesting to see. Always that there's more than just the city. And that was, a nice experience too. So I'll be back certainly. And thank you for coming, and have a good couple of days. Thank you.
Okay, as you guess, I'm back again. And Okay, we have done with the big starlets, although we have one more starlet who will speak separately, but nevertheless, let's remember that, yeah, stars are stars. However, we have here smaller sparklings here. And by the way, we have a small sparkling sponsor here. Let's not call them stars, but let's call them sparks. So we have the local sparks who have organized all of this and who are sponsoring this event. Okay, let's listen to Christine Gyonjan, Director of the Union of Operators of Armenia. Applause. Yeah. Thank you, Bahan. Good morning, everybody, dear guests, dear participants. I am really thankful that you have decided to join us at this beautiful sunny morning and joining our discussions. I would specifically to highlight that the Union of Operators of Armenia for the first time has organized the first forum of the Network Operators of Armenia, where the leading technological companies have gathered to discuss the main problems of the sphere, to exchange opinions about the development, future development and sustainable development of internet and communication sphere in the region. I'm sure these meetings are going to be continuous, the first, not the last. That's a fact that digitization is a priority for the businesses. But nevertheless, in the course, this very rapid development in the course of the recent years, we could say that has created not only advantages, but also brought forward certain challenges, and mainly for companies. According to forecasts, in 2020, in average, the companies of the sphere of communication, meaning the half of the income of these companies, will be generated by the new digital technologies. I think you would agree with me that that's not a news, these terms like cloud computing, OTT, AI, etc. And now it is necessary not only to make investments in technologies, but also to create corresponding legislative framework, laws meaning, and legal enactments, and possibilities, opportunities in order to become competitive with other companies in the world. So, from their very busy time, a lot of representatives of leading companies have chosen some days and hours to devote to meeting with us, and also leaders of governmental and not governmental organizations of Armenia and specialists have decided to join us. Want to express my appreciation of their choice, and I hope that they will make this discussion even more interesting, and I hope that this will be a very productive discussion. I want also to thank those companies who have helped to bring to reality this event. And so as everybody, all of us, be here, I wish everybody fruitful, productive, and very interesting working day. Thank you for the attention. As they say, as the Armenians say, the shortness is the sister of talent. Well, not only Armenians, a lot of other people say so. And the last keynote speaker, again, last but not least, one of those who are occupying the leading positions. Who's that? Guess who's that? What was the name? You remember the movie Three Musketeers? The D'Artagnan was asking somebody there, tell me the name, and well, she's not the movie, but she's Christina. Well, dear guests, dear participants, my name is Liana Galastyan. I am the coordinator of the Armenian IGF and member of the UN IGF MAC. Vahan will introduce later our team. We had this goal to unite representatives of leading companies, bring them to Armenia and introduce to them the possibilities, the potential of our companies, and provide them this platform where we can discuss things. All our keynote speakers have told you what's going to happen in the course of these 3 years. Today, we shall have the first meeting of the Union of Armenian Operators. We shall have then the Armenian IGF, which is having its 5th meeting this year. And along with that, there will be also the Youth IGF, which is going to happen for the first time this year, which will take place tomorrow. And tomorrow there will be also another event organized by ICANN, together with ISOC, Armenian chapter, an East European DNS Forum, which is happening for the 4th time. And that's a great honor for us that we are hosting that regional event in Armenia. About the development of Internet, my colleagues already have said, not going to say more. Simply, we do have big opportunities for developing the Armenian potential that is created, that is accumulated by our new generations. The Armenian Internet Management Forum is a stakeholder platform where all stakeholders are equally able to voice their vote or opinion, where the government is listening to the issues and questions raised by the community, where the technical community is offering solutions on how opportunities could be exploited and how other opportunities could be generated and what could be done together. Our agenda is being formed by the public. The topics are suggested, offered by the public, society, general public, and the topics of this year are about the localization of data, cryptification, if I may say so, of the data. We are going to discuss things about cyber security. We are going to have speeches about the digital future. All of these things are listed in the agenda. I call everybody to be active. The platform is open for everybody and the discussions. Okay, and that was it. Now, let's all together, one by one, remember the names of our sponsors. Internet Society, applause. Yeah, please. ICANN, ISOKN, RIPE-NCC, yes. More applause. ArmIGF, our one more star, Starlight, and the others. Voskevas wine, we are going to drink it, I suppose. And our gourmet chocolate also means that we are not going to have wine, but we are going to have some chocolate after wine, because we have such tasty sponsors. Well, indeed, the events of these 3 days are so many that I don't know, we won't be able to simply list all of them. The ISOC IOTC forum will be on the 2nd floor after the lunch, which is going to be a very interesting event. Beneath, on the ground floor, we have a small exhibition which is also providing some AI solutions, IoT solutions. We have today the meeting, the conference of the Union of Operators, ARNOG, Armenian IGF. Tomorrow we are going to have the Youth IGF. Today we have the RIPE-NCC member lunch for RIPE-NCC members. Tomorrow we are going to have a banking workshop with the World Bank for the banking and financial system, and all of this is going up. Liana, and all of this in the course of these 3 days. But that's good that they are supporting us, that they are financing us, that they are keeping kind of our shoulder standing. But in order to keep one's shoulder, you need to have someone robust, someone strong. So people who are keeping our shoulders, I think they are happy that they have the chance for doing so, and we are happy that they are happy for doing so. And these people are Liana Galestian, member of the organizational committee, Christine Rongia. Hakopian Christine, where is she? Hakopian Christine, who also is just keeping both of her hands behind our shoulders. And Ani Dalakan. That's her, and she is working for the youth part, but she's one of ours. Okay, this March, dear participants, for the last time I'm going to show this to you, and we're finishing with this, and we are passing to the next session, to the plenary session, which is exactly about the challenges of the digital future. Not only challenges, but also about the opportunities. So, the moderation, one more starlet, will be done by Sorina Teliane, sitting CEO, chairperson of the executive committee. Exactly. So she was the starlet about another yet star about whom we haven't talked yet. Who's that? You know? Frederic Donk, ISOC European Bureau leader, Frederic Donk. So, and I think we are going to do the following. We have a very, very smart management and structure. Ask me why. Because in those cases when there are urgent things to do, what does the minister do? The minister leaves his chair and lets the deputy minister to occupy it. So Mr. Armen Abroyan, the deputy minister, our most honored deputy minister, will join us and
Good morning. A little bit of housekeeping, but we are almost ready to start. All right, I think we're good to go. As Vahan has said, I'm Sorina Telanu from CIVIG, which is the Southeastern European Dialogue on Internet Governance, and happy to be moderating this panel. We only have 1 hour. I hope we still have 1 hour. So we will go directly into business. Today we're supposed to talk about the digital future challenges and opportunities. Predicting the future is not an easy task, but we will try today with our distinguished guests. And you have already met some of them, Joran Marby from ICANN and Axel Pavlik from RIPE NCC. The minister unfortunately had to go for some other meetings, but we have the deputy minister here, Armen Abroyan. I hope I pronounced that right, thank you. And we also have Frederic Donk from the Internet Society and, as I understand, the regular guest at Armenian IGF meetings. So welcome everyone, thank you for being on this panel, and let's go directly into it. We will have some opening remarks from our key participants about the digital future, the challenges and opportunities you see, how the work of your organization relates to that, and throughout the session we will also be inviting you to contribute to the discussion. We will be using a tool online, Liana can show it a bit later, and you will also have time to ask questions and maybe comments on the things we're going to debate. So let's start with Joran, or the Deputy Minister. I see a sign, okay, the Deputy Minister. Challenges and opportunities for the digital future, and maybe how is Armenia seeing that? What are you doing regarding the digital future? And just a quick note, because we are at the Internet Governance Forum, let's try to focus more on the Internet and maybe less on other broader digital technologies. Thank you.
Hello everyone. As the minister mentioned, with the new ministry we also identified new priorities, and one of the priorities, very important priorities, is digitalization of Armenia. It's digitalization of government, public sector, economy and society. And this is and we are working on a strategy that we are going to share very soon with all interested parties. and internet is a very important aspect of that of the digitalization process, and also Minister mentioned about delivering high quality internet all over the Armenia, across rural areas, the villages, and this is what we consider this to be very important because we want to Armenia be equally developed in terms of well, economically, but also digitally. And we think that every Armenian should has the good internet connection and good connectivity with the world. And you also know that Armenia has is not very well connected physically to the world because of the borders. But the digital world, it has no limits and has no borders, so what we can do is just improve our internet connectivity and digital agenda, and actually implement digital agenda of Armenia. And our ministry is going to take the role of organizing and coordinating digitalization of Armenia society and economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. We will be engaging in the discussion later on. So let's continue with our opening remarks. Ioran, challenges and opportunities, digital future.
Thank you. I mean, internet is a fairly interesting technical concept in that way. When I speak to my kids about the internet, and I always feel very old, I get reminded of the fact that I was 30 years old before the first commercial text message on a phone was sent. I lived my life until then in happy bliss of something that I needed, something like the internet. Yes, I'm very old. The fact that the internet has been, over the last 20 years, the fastest growing technology ever, it's quite remarkable. Because the interesting thing is that there is no single body that actually controls the internet. There is no one body that has everything to say about the technical underpinnings of the internet itself. I mean, here on the stage we have numbers, we have protocols, we all work together in a fantastic way to make this service to you. And I think that has been one of the things that made internet possible to reach 3.5 billion users in such few years. We work together with governments, but primarily we work with people around the world who all are engaging in our bottom-up process to form this. So the first challenge I see right now is that there is now, when internet has such an impact on society, that we see legislative proposals around the world that can actually have an effect on how internet works. They're often for a good reason. Privacy, fake news, IP rights, whatever is built. But sometimes we see those legislative proposals can actually make it impossible for people to connect to the internet, or actually be able to connect to someone in another country. Because the internet is a true country without border technology. So I think we are working, and I know my colleagues up here are working more and more to make sure that we can contribute in that discussion. Not from a policy standpoint, because we're all non-political organizations, but from the standpoint that we can actually tell that this kind of legislation can have an effect on the underpinnings of the internet. As I said earlier, there's a difference between applications on top of the internet, social media, whatever it is, and the internet itself. The second thing I mentioned as well is that we often talk about internet as this big, global, international thing. But it is, but it's not as well. Internet is very, very local. You want to go to websites that has your local language. You want to have news from your local from your local businesses. You want to check your children's schools in local language. And you want, most of your friends are quite local. And this is something that internet wasn't really created for, to take into account. And that's why we are now in the process of trying to sort of change it within the parameters to make it more local. Let's face it, the current users of the internet, the 3.5 billion, are often the elites. They have money, they live in cities, they have access to information. The next billion users will be in rural areas. Africa, South America, Asia, and countries around here, to increase the internet penetration. These people may not have all the money to get access to the information, but it means that they have to have a reason to go online, and that reason is often local. So that's why we spend so much resources and time to try to develop what we call local scripts, to make sure that people can go online using their own keyboards, using a mobile phone with their own keyboards in their own language. It shouldn't be necessary for you to be knowledgeable in English to be able to utilize the internet. That's a really big challenge for us. And I think in many of my speeches I summarize something we talk about internally. I mean, we are not a commercial organization, and the only way we do this is because we know that when two people connect on the internet, something magical happens. But it also takes away one of the biggest disadvantages that exists for poor people, access to information. If you have poor people getting online, you actually make a difference for that person, who now, for the first time in history, has the same information as rich people. Security. And I'm not talking about, I can talk at length about your personal security on the internet, and talk about, like, make sure that you clean your cookies, clean your cache, and clean your underwear very often. Make sure that your firewalls, my comms departments are just sitting like this. Is he doing that again? But the DNS systems and the system we represent is a fundamental part of your ability to access to the internet. And inside ICANN and with the organizations we work with, we are now doing a lot of things to try to improve the security, everything from the root servers all the way up to what we call the DNS systems. They're under attack. We work together with local country code operators. We work with a lot of them to create best practices and also share information, so we can make sure together that the systems that we create and go forward can be as secure as we want going in the future. What I think I want to say is that don't take internet for granted. Don't take the governance model that we built up for granted just because it's been working. We're going to need, it's like everything else. Every machine needs oiling, every machine needs participation. We're not done yet. Well, we've done half of the job. We need to get the rest of the world connected. We need to get more secure. We need to add more privacy into it. We have to make sure that it actually works for the next generation as well. We need your participation. We need you to come to ICANN meetings or RIGHT meetings or ISOC meetings, whatever it is, to be a part of it. The work is not done. Thank you.
Thank you also. I would have liked us to use the online tool, but I'm not sure anyone is around the computer, so I guess we leave that for later. Axel, moving to you. Challenges and opportunities of the digital future, and how do they relate to the work of RIPE NCC?
Right, thank you. So, the RIPE NCC, what are we doing? Like I mentioned earlier, the Network Coordination Center. So we were set up to run conferences in the beginning and make sure that there's enough coffee and cookies, and now my comms people are looking at me again. But also to have a list of address blocks and associate with them the people that are using them. So in the early times we could ring people up and parts of the net would go down and there were problems, and we knew who was using that. So that's now called the RIPE database. It's one of the core things that we are doing. And that's just the start. Then of course the usual challenges are IPv4, IPv6, IPv6 rollout. When I was interviewed for my job a long time ago, IPv6 was sort of on the doorsteps, and yes, of course we'll do this, and of course we are allocating IPv6 addresses, but we are still talking about it, and we do see an uptick here and there, but we are by far not quite there. I hear that Armenia has very recently jumped by 7% IPv6 traffic to 7% IPv6 traffic. That's great. There was nothing there before, not that much. And now they're number 2 in the region. That's lovely. But of course, we are not there yet. Another topic that comes up, and Johan touched upon it, is security and stability. And of course, also for a long time by now, we are providing facilities for secure routing, namely APKI infrastructure. That's also something that we talk about. We want to see more uptake there in the interest of stability and secure routing. But what the main challenge, or what I find the most interesting challenge at this point, is not that much a technical one. It's more one of community building. Johan mentioned legislation, and that is something that we see ourselves as well. We are covering 76 countries, Europe, Middle East, parts of Central Asia, and they all have, many of them have quite different opinions on the internet and what should be going on and how that should be managed and regulated. So there is a threat on the horizon for us of diverging regulation in some of the countries in our service region. How do we deal with that? And then I mentioned the database in the beginning. Oh, that's a list of people using parts of the address blocks. And that's like nearly 30 years ago. We still do this, of course, and now we see people coming in that says, oh, we want to shape the policy so that we can have easy access to also data that is maybe not public in that database, but more stuff that the RIPE NCC keeps for themselves about, so who are our members and who is using what. And those people demanding that sometimes is law enforcement. So when we started all this many, many years ago, we didn't think of law enforcement. I remember the Declaration of Independence of Cyberspace. We don't need governments and all that. No, we do stuff very well with this internet thing of ours. I think we have a slightly different opinion here and there by now, and we have the police force taking part in our policy processes, and sometimes they're met with acrimony. Like, we didn't build a database for you and for your purposes. We are just engineers. And I think that doesn't really cut it anymore these days. We have to develop our community that we are working for and working with, and to widen it and have those relative newcomers accepted as part of the internet community, and the RIPE community in this case, with very legitimate interests. And I think that is one of the main challenges that I see coming for us. Thank you.
Thank you as well. Frederick, I'll kindly ask for 1 minute, so we ask a question to the audience and then we go to you. And Liana is working on that. So before we go to Frederick, we have a question we do invite you to answer, and then the panelists will comment on that. And Liana will be doing that at some point, and you will see the instructions there. Frederick, let's go directly into challenges and opportunities, digital future, especially because the Internet Society has been doing quite a lot of work on that with your annual reports and your scenarios for the future of the Internet. So tell us a bit about it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sorina. And yes, I'm a regular visitor of Yerevan. I mean, the customs, Candy told me that I was here the 12th of October last year, and they gave me the whole list of my interesting. For those who are interested, to just take the words of Joran, yes, we are the protocols guys, the geeks as well. We are home to the ArmIGF, which is the global standardizations body for the internet. But we have developed other activities on top of this, and indeed it includes engaging with communities, with policymakers, with all sorts of stakeholders to make sure that they share our vision that the internet is that place that should remain accessible, trustworthy for everybody. When it's about the future, Sorina mentioned a report that we did 2 years ago in 2017, in which we were cautious enough to not say what the internet would look like in 10 years from now, because we know the internet never forgets. So we came up with drivers. What are the clear drivers that will lead the internet to some place? Some of them are already happening. We were referring to consolidations of the big players, to trust issues, to the IoT, security, all sorts of issues. So I would invite you to check this on our website. So if I would have to take 3 specific issues that are really close, not only to my heart, but close to our activities in IVSOC, I would certainly mention access, of course. There are positive and negative. Yes, we succeed to connect half of the world. It means that the next half of the world still need to be connected. And that one will be much more difficult than the first part. We're talking about people in really remote areas, in desert, in islands, everywhere, mountains, where it will be fairly more difficult to bridge the digital gap. Talking about this, we are creating another kind of digital gaps. There are still people now who are accessing the internet on the 2G, on the 3G, while others have broadband. So this is another kind of digital gap. I might talk a bit later about some of our activities. Community networks, for example, is something we really are a strong believer in. I was yesterday in Georgia, we're discussing with our Georgian friends about project that we have in these countries based on a community building their own network. So that is very interesting. Second big issue to me, trust. Trust remains an extremely big issue. You know that all humankind is based, or relationship is based on trust. The financial sector is based on trust. So is the internet. And when you lack trust, you see people behavior change drastically to an extent that it might jeopardize the way the internet will evolve. We're all responsible for that. Joran is right. Nobody owns the internet. We all own it. So we're all responsible for this. From a nicer perspective, we believe, for example, that encryption is a very important issue, and we want to maintain it. And I will have the chance maybe later to walk you through this. And then the last one, which is a terrible word that I would use, you will see body language from those who are sitting next to me, and that is fragmentation. To us, this is the overall nuclear kind of danger for the internet. And fragmentation is just not because of, well, it is mainly because of regulation and legislation. From one part, sometimes with good intention, governments or regions try to regulate the internet in a way that actually provoke that fragmentation of the infrastructures. I might come back on that later. But of course, there are also fragmentation from commercials, from operators, from other activities when you are deciding yourself to put you in a walled garden using a service that just keep you in there. So those are the three threats that I see for the internet. Thank you.
Thank you as well. So while you were speaking, I was taking note to see if you talk about similar challenges, and you do, especially when it comes to security and the stability of the infrastructure. So that was something most of you were talking about. Then we have access, connectivity, connecting the next billion, privacy, trust, and fragmentation. Now let's ask you, what worries you most about the internet? And some of you have used the tool, but we can also pass the mic in the room, right? I can do that also. So what worries you most about the internet and the future of the internet, our digital future? Please go ahead.
Hello, I'm Alexander Sanin from Russian Federation. I think the most dangerous for future of the internet is governmental regulations. Even Mr. Marp is saying that ICANN is not political organization. ICANN is de facto political organization. When they're ignoring or acting like we are engineers, we do not like to discuss regulations. You de facto support such regulations and making, like colleague says, people from one country not available to access information for other countries. Or in welcoming court, Mr. Marby mentioned the fake news as a problem, as a potential problem, not being technical. But he did not mention like censorship problem, which is being implemented on technical level, and technical measures are used by government as censorship things, as restricting freedom of speech and freedom of people. So I think one thing is a government regulation, one dangerous thing for the internet, and another thing is passiveness of international organizations like ICANN and ISOC, who resides in normal democratic countries and does not see issues of the third and fourth world countries. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend, and I love to have the same debate with you again. It's a pleasure. I mean, first of all, I respect your opinions, but ICANN is not the place to do this. We are a technical organization to provide a service to the world. And I think it would be, I personally think, and ICANN, in the ICANN community, and everybody, most of them agreeing with it, we should focus on remit. There are much better other organizations who could drive that. The political discussions, and the censorship discussions, and the fake news discussions. Because I think that some people seem to believe that when we delegate something, we can take it back. We have no powers around our words when it comes to that. The only thing we do is to provide the world with all the identifiers, with a home for the protocols. We work with the RERs to distribute the IP numbers, who are the ones who actually sends them out. And I think it's not a question of what I think, what I care, but you missed one thing, and that is what I said, that we are increasingly engaging on the mission from the community with legislative proposals that have an effect for ICANN's ability to make policies or could disconnect people. And we do that, and you know we do that. But it's a difference of doing that, and most countries in the world are democratic. There's a sliding scale, but on the UN list there are many countries who's trying to do the right thing. And it's a balance. So our belief is that there are better organizations who can actually help you more than I can. Thank you. And thank you. I'm looking forward to have this conversation again.
Anyone else in the room? I don't see any hand, which is not a very good sign, because this was supposed to be an interactive discussion. Let me see what's on the screen. So what worries you most about the digital future? Mass surveillance, privacy, government regulation. Only that? You're not worried about anything else? The future is bright, I guess, right? All right, let's go back to our panel then. And because quite a lot of you have mentioned government regulations, we've also seen recently an increasing number of calls for more governmental regulations dealing with different issues, privacy, security, the challenges of online platforms and this and that. And this also happens at the international level with calls being made for example, the Digital Geneva Convention with Microsoft proposal. Is it really the role of governments to deal with all these challenges of the internet? Can the governments alone do that? If not, who, how, and how about this fancy word these days, digital cooperation, especially among the organizations here on the table? Anyone would like to give it a go?
Yeah, okay. Well, we have a government with us, so we certainly would better be able to answer to this question. Well, the internet is everybody's affair. In ISOC, in ICANN, in IETF, you got governments, so it means that everybody has a stake, including governments. Government represents people, and they will have to deal with issues. So Joran said something interesting. I would extend this, and that is that the trend that we see now is that obviously the internet seems the depository of every issue that we have in our societies. And that is that's very dangerous. I see this in many debates on security, on privacy, on all sorts of issues, fake news, where suddenly the internet becomes the place where those issues should be dealt with. We have a say in the technical community, and that is technical issues as best dealt with by technical people and policy issues by policymakers, and we should not mix. Actually, the worst that might ever happen is when the government says, I have a solution at technical level. So that's when it starts to scare us. As you remember, some policymakers took decisions saying, I have a solution that might actually solve society issues while trying to have an impact on the infrastructure itself. So this is where we should start discussing. So I believe that government have legitimate roles in dealing with security issues, but this is the impact and sometimes unintended impacts of what they do that might affect the internet. And we call this in our community the invariance of the internet. The internet has been built on very strong principles, and we believe that we should keep them in order to continue and have this wonderful platform to continue to. Well, that's the start of an answer.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I share your ideas. The short answer to your question is government can't solve all the problems on its own, but because of few aspects. One is government doesn't have all the technical abilities. So organizations like we have today, they are dedicated to also to solve technical problems, identify and be the geeks in the sphere, and government needs that knowledge to be shared with the government and to raise the problems, questions with the government, so government can then take the lead in the country, of course, and connect sites, create platforms for multi-stakeholder discussions, so the problems can be solved. So government can also raise problems on its own, but it's much easier when it also comes from other sides. And I agree that the main role of government is to speak from name of people, from name of citizens. So in the end, government will decide what is good for the citizens and how to move forward, having all the multi-stakeholder opinions and ideas. So government is positioning here as the organization that is delegated to talk for citizens here. Thank you.
Good morning. There is one thing that I think that we as a collective has not been very good at, and that is actually educating the policymakers of what we do. Nowadays, to my joy, I actually do spend a lot of time with policymakers, just trying to make them to understand that virtual doesn't exist. Cloud computing is just someone else's computer. And when you walk into a social media application, you leave the internet. It's another world. And take crime, things that, and when I say things like, what's illegal in the real world is illegal on the internet. That is, it's like internet would be its own space. When every computer in the world is in a country, and if a country has a problem with that computer in another country, the countries could actually fix that. If there are illegal content, fraud, for instance, from a computer from some other countries, it should be addressed by the countries and not by the system itself. And why is that important? It is important because there are established mechanisms about it. But the internet has sort of proven, and someone said that there are many things in life that has not been fixed. There is no international trademark law, believe me. There are conventions and agreements with some countries, but there are things that's not been solved. And by internet then, sometimes they try to go to us and ask us to solve issues that no one has been able to solve before. And I think that it's not because we are unwilling not to take on the tasks, but sometimes from a technical perspective, it's sort of hard to fix, like, who owns the word Amazon on the internet, or someone else you want to have a discussion about. No one has been able to solve them before. And what Fredrik, I think Fredrik said as well, is that you actually have elected people to take on those charges. So yes, it is a cooperation, but it's also a very big difference what people define as the problem and the technical underpinnings of what creates this ability to connect. Thank you.
Right, I pretty much agree with all of you guys. It's probably not the role of governments to fix the internet. Although sometimes we have interesting effects. So I believe there is a new regulation in Belarus that operators have to deploy IPv6. And I'm looking at that and said, that sort of goes into the same direction that we are talking for many years. Yes, you should roll out IPv6. So is that a good thing that there's regulation to that effect now, or is it a bad thing? And I don't really know. In one aspect, it goes against the grain in what I believe in, and that's what sort of the RIPE NCC and this community stands for. It's bottom-up industry self-regulation. So occasionally, maybe there is some push and some need helped from governmental regulation. Might be, I don't know. But in essence, we have to do, we feel, we have to do what we can to distribute knowledge, to do outreach, to do coordination with everybody, and not only the techies, also with governments and regulators and the police force and not the traditional techie community. We need to distribute the knowledge that we have, the data that we have, and the information that we can gain from that for better cooperation and better regulation or lack of regulation where that is needed. Thank you.
Thank you also. Do we have questions or comments in the room? That cloud doesn't seem to change, so we still have privacy, mass surveillance, government regulation, and artificial intelligence. Nothing else from the room? We continue with the panel? Okay, we continue with the panel. So let's try to come a bit within this region, because we've talked about global challenges mostly, and there was a bit of discussion about local content, local scripts, and how they are used on the internet. I would start with the Deputy Minister, because we've spoken about a few challenges. Are they relevant also for Armenia and maybe for the neighboring countries? And are there challenges which are maybe more important here that we haven't spoken about? Challenges related to the internet, the digital future?
The challenges that we just discussed?
Whether they are relevant for Armenia and for the region, and whether there is something else which is maybe important here that we haven't spoken about.
Yeah, for sure. And it's all, I think all the questions that we covered today, they are all relevant for Armenia. And the other questions is the actually connectivity, which also was covered. I can't think of any other, but there can be.
Is there any sort of mechanism for cooperation in the region, for example, between countries on digital issues, internet-related issues? I'm sure you have some agreements signed with some other countries.
Yeah, thanks for the hint. Yeah, of course. So we talked about the borders, and to develop this idea more with connecting Armenia to the world is to, well, it's connectivity in both sides, in the side and to the outside world. And we connected to both sides to the world, north and south, and to Georgia and Iran. And when I learned that we provide internet for Iran, 40% of data for Iran from Armenia, it was exciting for me. It just recently learned when I came to ministry, and I understood that this is a real big opportunity for Armenia to be a transit country for neighboring countries. For both to have better connectivity in the Armenia, but also to serve as a transit for other Arabic countries and from Arabic countries to Europe. So we have plans here with, and we have many agreements and to develop this idea of connecting Europe to Iran, and Arabic countries than to China. So discussions are going, and there is lots of interest from the older countries that are going to be involved to build this connectivity, which is very exciting because it's going to be easier to implement. And there is also another idea of building a second wire through the Black Sea to connect Europe to Georgia and then Armenia, which is also going to be very important in terms of having a backup cable and also double the capacity connecting Armenia and other countries to Europe.
Because we're in the region and you're all here, I also can write, why are you here? What are your priorities in the region? How are you engaged with the region, and how do you see the contribution of this region to the digital future? The big question mark. Who would like to start?
Is it working? Yes, yes, okay, thank you. Well, wide question and many answers to this one, Sorina. I was looking at the chart, and then I remembered that one of the reasons I came here as a regular visitor is that for the first time we got a youth IGF. So I don't want to be mainstream with everything about youth again, right? But honestly, it's a huge step. I remember this line from Einstein saying, you know, you cannot solve issues created by people. You need another level of consciousness to solve those issues. I believe youth might solve some of the big issues we are facing. Internet is about sharing, and I believe there is a generation that knows what it is. We're facing issues where we will have to invent a new economy that is based on sharing, and the internet is very helpful here. I believe that there's a lot of issues, and I'm looking forward to discuss this with youth tomorrow during the Youth IGF. So one of the reasons we are in the region is, as Axel mentioned, it's about community building. That is a very important issue for us because this is where the internet needs to go. We need to build with new communities who share our vision. And whenever I come to this region, to the Caucasus, but also in the southeastern Europe and the Balkans, I'm always struck by the fact that there are so many young people attending those conferences, and it's really rewarding. We see that this is the next generations that can take it over. So again, I don't want to be mainstream, but honestly, when it's about community building, we really need this contribution. Thank you.
Yeah, I can just jump right into there. Community building, connecting people to us. We're talking about our members. It's interesting to see who they are and what they want from us as an organization. But also we've seen this, and that's something Frederick has sort of mentioned, going into the somewhat more outlying regions, smaller countries that we don't see participation from regularly at RIPE meetings, for instance. At some point we said, okay, if they're not coming to us, we need to go out and find them. And that's what we did. And then in many cases, we saw a local, maybe not quite community, maybe a proto-community of engineers that maybe know of each other but haven't really talked with each other that much. And by setting up a small meeting, smaller like this, it gave so the crystallization point for that community to actually come together to form a national operators group, network operators group, something like that. That is again very gratifying to see that happening, and that's the reason we go out and come here too. Also, I like the food and the drink.
It's sort of hard to add on to everything that's said, but I think that one of the things we have to realize is that we've done the easy part. We now have to figure out ways of doing the harder part, and connectivity is, for instance, one of if we don't look only here but in other areas around the world, the people's ability to actually physically connect to the internet is something of a problem. But the next billion users will be primarily mobile. They will not have English as their native language, or not even as a concept. One of the biggest problems is that how can they afford to pay for the connectivity? And another problem in many countries is actually access to energy and power. And I think that we often talk about the digital economy. But what happened, a digital economy in a country doesn't really happen if everybody goes online and then goes on social media with services in another country. So I think that we all, for the first time, really need to figure out a way how to talk and interact with regulators, with telcos, ISPs, the DNS industry, the protocols, the numbers, because we have to produce, and I don't like to use that word, but it's like a business plan. We're all non-profits. A business plan to actually to build something that people can afford to have. I mean, and it's going to be harder. So we don't have the answers to it. But through a forum like this, and not only young people, there are some old people. We're old. Can have something to say about that. But it's like you're dealing with spectrum problems. That will have an effect on your ability to build a local market for DNS. And if you have a local market for DNS, you can have local web pages if we get the scripts. And you also need the IP addresses, and then you need IETF to come up with protocols. So if we can't figure that out, we will have a problem. But and that's why I'm here, because I'm realizing, I also have a member of my staff living here, so ICANN is always here. We need to figure this out together, and these are the venues, and that's why I'm here. And by the way, I also like the food and wine. I don't know about the vodka though. A little bit too strong for me coming from some. Translate that, please.
I think it's been translated already. So besides the wine and the food, the opportunities offered by the engagement of people in this internet governance digital policy processes is one of the reasons why you are here. So I guess on behalf of everyone, we thank you for being here. I think we have about 10 more minutes left of this session, so we will try to wrap up. And we ask another question on the screen. I'll try to see the answers. Describe the internet that you want in 1 or 2 words. And I see new opportunities, open to all, connectivity, freedom, no hate speech, unlimited, and something small which I don't see, so I have to move. Less noise and safe. I think this all relate to things we have spoken about so far, but would anyone in the audience like to add something on any of this, or maybe ask questions to our key participants? Now is your last opportunity to speak. Okay, we have a very quiet audience. Maybe that changes over the... Yes. Okay, so maybe after the coffee you will be able to engage more with the sessions. All right, so let's go to probably the last question on this panel. It's difficult to predict the internet. Frederick has said that, and everyone is aware of that. But let's think a year from now, maybe. Imagine you are here back again at the Armenian IGF. What would be your wish for the next year? One key thing that you would hope would be tackled some way better in your organizations, in the broader internet governance, digital policy ecosystem, governments dealing better with, I don't know, what's there? No hate speech, openness, connectivity, and one recommendation in this regard. So one key issue and one recommendation 1 year from now. Thank you.
But when I come back in a year, everybody actually understand how internet works, because I think that's going to help the conversation a lot. If you actually did understand, if more people understood how internet works, what role or our role is in it, from a technical perspective. So my recommendation would be train people. And we actually have a lot of training material on ICANN, where you can find a lot of information about how this thing works. Because then it's easier to participate in the discussions about the future of the internet. If you forget the technical underpinnings, You might end up making decisions based on what you think, and that is not often a very good idea.
Thank you. And on this note, actually, all of you here are involved in capacity development programs, and all of you are partnered, and I'll do a bit of a promotion now, on a winter school on internet governance, digital policies, and innovation happening in December in Bucharest. So that's an opportunity to learn about the internet. Apply for it, you still have time. Axel, Frederic, Deputy Minister.
I would like to be more optimistic about openness and inclusion, like building the community, building out the community, bringing in the new people, making them really, really welcome and have them contribute, and also have knowledge transfer happening all around. So that's at the core of my wish.
Yes, my turn. Pretty well in line with what Joran said. I use, and I don't know how you will translate this word invariance. I would like people to understand what they fight for. And that is for principles that are really the one who build and sustain the internet as we know it. That is, of course, its openness, accessibility, but principle like end-to-end. The internet has been built to be global. I should be able to reach out to any other endpoint on the internet. Well, that is being challenged. The internet should not be taken for granted. So people should understand and actually read any policymaker's decision or legislations or regulation with this kind of glasses. Does it impact those invariants of the internet? If it does, even if we mention security, and you know that governments are easily coming with trade-off. If you need more security, you will have less privacy. I'm sorry, this is not true. So let's keep, as Joran said, let's really make sure that people understand how the internet works, why internet is so successful. And this is successful because of those principles. So let's keep those principles alive and then discuss with policymakers and whoever in the rooms. Thank you.
Yes, one wish 1 year from now, internet, digital technologies related, one recommendation. So far we've spoken about community building, better understanding, engagement, people really seeing the stake in what's happening.
Well, I like to focus on stuff just to make sure that we fix the problem. So my focus is just to make sure that everyone is connected in Armenia and they have good quality and affordable internet. And I shared ideas regarding the community building and especially the security is very important aspect. In Armenia, it's a very big issue that we need to solve. And yeah, I think with our 5-year plan, we should be able to have revolutionary improvement in that sphere. So let's see how it goes.
Thank you, and I think that wraps up the session. Sure.
Sorry, I'm going to change subject for a second, and I know because some of the people in the room will be aware of this, that my dear friend and my associate and my head of senior VP of governmental affairs, Dr. Derek Gamble, unfortunately passed away this morning. And we are a little bit in shock right now. There will be more information coming out later about it, but for those who know him and loved him, be a part of that. Thank you.
Nothing to comment on that. Thank you everyone for being on this panel. Thank you to our key participants. You will be here for the rest of the day, as I understand, and the following days for the Eastern European DNS Forum, so you will have another opportunity to engage with them, and I guess coffee is on the way. Thank you.
Separation, and we're starting the 5th AGF forum, and I'm inviting Mr. Armen Abroyan, who is also the head of the internet internet governance, and he will tell us about this sphere, about this structure, why was it created, and how can we participate in its further building and development. And the floor is yours, Mr. Abroyan. Good morning. Oh, thank you very much for your interest, dear guests and participants. As it was said, in Armenia we have a Council of Internet Government, which was novelty for me when I first came to the ministry. But when I learned that it was established in 2014 and that it has been, and that till today it has done quite significant work, quite well, not that quite significant. Well, after the, well, starting from the day of establishment of this new ministry, we decided that regardless of what has not been done, that council is to serve its purpose and to be more active in developing policies for regulating the sphere. And in the ministry there has been made a decision to add different stakeholders and representatives in that council, include also deputies from the National Assembly, representatives of ISOC and other organizations. This year certain processes have been implemented by the council where solutions have been given to a number of issues, which is already speaking in favor of the success of the council. And starting from the date of establishment of our ministry has taken the responsibility for chairing that council. And the council has submitted names of candidates in ICANN, also ICANN counselor inside international organization ICANN. So far, this much. In future, we plan to more actively cooperate with these organizations, and we hope that we will come up with a bigger, more enhanced plan of actions, and it will allow us to make more detailed and more, how to say, impressive reports on the attainments, achievements, success in the framework of the things that are to be done in future. Thank you very much for attention, and if you have questions, come on. Liana has a question. I just finished my presentation. I want to apologize because I'm forced to leave you very soon. It was supposed that I should participate in the discussion, but there is one startup initiative where I am one of the judges, and I can't simply afford not attending that event. So yeah, it has coincided. So, well, nevertheless, never mind. Thank you very much for your participation. And as we have here the presence of Mr. Grigor Saryan, the secretary of the AGF, and Mr. Saryan is the secretary of that council, I want to give the floor to Mr. Saryan, and if you would have questions about the structure, Mr. Saryan will answer to your questions. Okay, so the foundation, as it was said by Mr. Abroyan, is our start point, where from we started building it. Has been in 2002 in Marrakesh, by the decision of the International Union of Communication, was created something, or WSIS, which is the World Summit for Information Society. And that initiative developed in two phases, in 2003 in Geneva and in 2005 in Tunis. We have participated along with these summits were attended by the prime ministers or presidents of 46 countries who have signed this WCSIS, which had an action plan, and it stipulated certain activities, and it also stipulated annual Internet Management Forums. So the Internet Management Forum took place in Athens in 2006, according to that action plan that was signed by the ministers of the countries. What's the most significant thing in this WCSIS? That for the first time, the heads of the governments had signed under a document which had in itself this concept of multi-stakeholder. Before that, the ITU was using multilateral relations, that is to say intergovernmental relations between several governments. And in general, this intergovernmental relation or concept of relation means that only governments can participate in this. But it was highlighted that in internet management also private sector can be involved, the academy can be involved, and also intermediary organizations. And already this year, from November 25 to 29, in Berlin will take place the 28th summit. And our country, in the face of the participants of the Internet Union, in the face of the government, we are very actively participating in these initiatives. And let me tell you that also that similar initiatives of Internet Management Forum, Internet Management Council exists already in around 118 countries. And these initiatives are kind of under the aegis of the United Nations. That is to say, we have sponsorship of the United Nations to have this event in this format. Let me tell you a couple of words about how we succeeded in bringing up this information to our government that there is something like this going on. In 2011 in Dubai took place the IT conference in sequence, which was devoted to the regulation of international telecommunication, which means that there should be certain laws that, and as WSIS assumed that there is going to be participation of not only governments, but also, as I said previously, of private sector, of non-governmental sector. Certain discussions were started in respect of the position of Armenia, and in the result of these discussions a document emerged which expressed the position of Armenia to this international communication regulation, which was kind of quite liberal document, and the government confirmed it, the presidential office also confirmed it, corroborated it, and Mr. Grigorian, who is here, very actively supported us in achieving that document. In Dubai, we managed to keep we managed to keep the position of Armenia of rejecting all restrictions connected with internet. 55 countries, all of them democratic countries, including Armenia, did not sign that restricting document that would, in a sense, limit the freedom of internet. I think that was a great attainment, a big achievement, and many countries have reacted very positively to that. But as long as the principles already existed on how to manage the internet, that document became a foundation, like a basis, so as the Ministry of Transportation, the former Ministry of Transportation, to apply to the government with the request to create this Internet Management Council. Well, the question was who's going to be involved in it. We call it multi-stakeholder, but what do we understand when we say multi-stakeholder? And now we go back to what does mean Internet, what is about Internet. And it is mainly about three things. It has mainly three sectors. The first one are the telecommunication infrastructures, which is regulated by the International Telecommunication Unit. And in each country, the Ministry of Transportation and Communication, if they have any, does that regulation. The second level, well, we could compare it with the roads, like a road map, a network of roads on which the buses are moving. But the roads and the cities have also address system, identification system. Now, who's giving us these addresses, this identification system? To our pleasure, we had a chance today to enjoy the speeches of two individuals, one of whom is the director of the ICANN, who is globally distributing the IP addresses, domain names. And our guest is Axel Pavlik, who is actually dealing with distribution of these numbers in our region, which means Europe, Armenia, in particular former Soviet Union. I don't know why Iran is also in this region, but whatever. And these IP addresses are distributed by this organization, right, registered in Amsterdam. Well, we understand very well that it's impossible to deliver any goods or services without the addresses, which is the second level. And the third level is, imagine, we have delivered the product in a car to a house. In that house, we see library or bookcase, which means content. We can open it and read it. So, content. Each country regulates its content with corresponding legislation. Till today, Armenia has not interfered to that content which is not an evident crime. And definition of the crime is given in our criminal code. But police deals with it. But content which is even considered to be hazardous or dangerous is not regulated in our country, Armenia. We do see this kind of interference or regulation in those countries which are regulated kind of by a one-party system, like for example China, or in some other countries which are religiously governed countries, because their religious demands require content restriction or content management. Well, we are lucky enough that we and our contemporaries live in Armenia, which is a democratic country, does not have any religious, and is not one-party system. And we are at the, let me tell you, 28th and 27th place in ranking each year about this internet governance laws, and one of our colleagues will tell you about this in detail. And at 11 o'clock, if I'm not mistaken, 13 o'clock, 1 o'clock, we are going to have a very interesting discussion on cyber security. I think it would be very interesting to see through that discussion whether it is possible to have within one domain, when I say domain, I mean one space, the operation of the internet and have security. Because the Soviet mentality is requiring to concentrate these two concepts under the roof of one and the same organization. The international experience shows that it is necessary to divide, to separate it. That is to say, to provide the work of the infrastructures, to provide the address system, and that's it. If the content happens to be a crime, then the police will come in and do whatever it is supposed to do, nothing else. The content of that council was very difficult to devise. For the addressing part, it is the highdomain.am. For the infrastructure, we have included 2 operators on rotation principle. Now remains the content part. The content part we have imagined approximately this way. Those who are creating the content. This is the Association of Mass Media, our national library, meaning the libraries or Association of Libraries, which also is a big source of information. An academy like research community, which is provided by the National Academy of Sciences. We have individual experts who are participating simply in the work of the Internet Council. Well, unfortunately, in the course of the last 2 years, we can boast of only one achievement, that the Ministry of Transportation and Communication has signed with ICANN a memorandum of understanding. Why do I say this is important? Because if we receive the telephone numbers from the International Communication ICU, then our legislation says the following about the IP addresses and domains. They say that we do not give these addresses and names. So if we do not give, we do not regulate in any way. Well, this memorandum of understanding actually allows to say that Armenia, government of Armenia, recognizes ICANN, and in some instances it allows to cooperate the government with ICANN around certain issues. I think we can be more active in Armenia, discuss those urgent issues. As I said, one of the urgent issues is the content and cyber security, whether it is possible to have in one place, and the second, where to keep the data, which is a painful question. We do not know where we can keep data because we do not have such regulation. One more question has come forward, which we have discussed separately. How long should be kept information about the accumulated data? Russia, for example, has adopted such law that requires to keep full content for 6 months. We suggest a project on keeping for some time certain amount of content. Well, let's consider that this is exactly that public discussion that would allow us to understand which direction is right, who's going to finance it, what kind of icebergs or reefs there are. And the third issue, which is very interesting today, is the content that is being disseminated in the electronic communication networks. Today we have 2 licenses. One is given by the Commission regulating the public services, and some operators on their own or because they like it, go receive license from the Commission of Radio TV Broadcasters. I have received a license from this Commission on Radio Communication Services but it turns out that because of some reasons, these people need also the second license or permit, which is the permit for acquiring the right to broadcast. That's not only the Armenia's issue. They hardly imagine how to solve this question all over the world. That commission that is regulating radio and TV broadcasting, maybe they should also, the question is whether it's possible or not to allow them to regulate internet as well. My personal opinion, it is impossible. That a second license is something senseless, something bureaucratic, waste of time and resources. This much about our Internet Management Commission and about the issues that we would like to present to your attention. And if you have questions, I'm ready to answer to them. Only please ask the questions into the microphone. Well, the question was about the participation of people. There is IGC AM site where you can submit all your suggestions. We do have another issue which is not going to be discussed, which is dissemination of the .hi domain, which still needs public discussion. It turned out that 10 years ago, actually, in Armenia, it was offered to have a different code for the Armenian dot. Well, if, for example, you type some in Armenian figures some domain name and .hi, and you send it to the corresponding company, the servers, the root servers that have to answer, they, besides the symbol that is recognizable for them, comes another symbol, the Armenian dot, and they just say, we don't understand what you are asking, and it's impossible to enter. That is to say, to type the Armenian letter, you make it Armenian, you change the register, you continue then in Latin, you have to constantly change the registers. This is a problem connected with the publishers. They say, when we make it, when we type quickly and put dot, the word understands that the next letter is to be capitalized. But the Armenian dot is not the full stop, is not the end of the sentence, that does not need the next word to start with the capitalized letter. That's why we had to change the code. But in Armenia, when we put our full stop, then, which is Armenian full stop, then we have to have capitalized the beginning of the next sentence. So the question, which way is more necessary for us to type by word processor with no problem of capitalized letter next, or should we do this, or we need it more in URL? Well, it is necessary to apply to Unicode Consortium, which is a separate question. This kind of issues which come forward, we are ready to put them for discussion, to raise them for discussion, and to think about possible solutions. And if you have more questions, come on, don't be shy. Thank you for attention. Well, little by little, we are passing to the next session, although the keynote speakers are still approaching. The next session, moderator will be Samuel Martirosyan. He will be leading, as Grigor Sahian said, the location of data. Nobody knows where to keep data, what should be done, and Samuel will try to moderate this session, and let's see what opinions our keynote speakers have. So, speakers, Hai Kabelian, Armenian police of Armenia. Then representative from Security of Council, Office of Armenia, Albert Nersesyan, and Georg Kairabetsan is approaching currently, head of Personal Data Protection Agency. Thank you. I will try to make a small introduction. Wherever it is necessary, well, no, not wherever, where to keep the data, that's not only the issue of Armenia today. For many, many countries, this has become such an important issue that, for example, Russia today tries to force by the power of law to develop the data belonging to Russian citizens only on servers that are situated inside the Russian Federation, which has brought to the situation that as of now, one of the social networks, I'm speaking about LinkedIn, is at the edge of closure. They are communicating with others, and I suppose nothing will happen. I don't think that either Google or Facebook are going to agree to that dislocation. We have here a representative of Russia. You can ask him later. But if we were to come back to Armenia, where to keep, here or not, amongst us, this issue has several aspects. First aspect is that, let me say this way, for the first time in general, these issues start emerging because of security issues. When the Security Council took this responsibility of cyber security in 2012, and well, in Armenia de facto we have the following: that state data in Armenia are placed within the territory of Republic of Armenia, of course based on security considerations. And there is another approach as well. Estonia, for example, who underwent mass attack by Russian hackers in 1929, they may have made a different decision. Being a small country which does not have big data centers, although their data centers are more powerful than whole Armenia is, they decided to keep their data outside Estonia. So as in case of such mass attacks, they won't be forced to alone defend themselves with their own infrastructures. We have experience of serious attacks in 2012, in 2015, also in connection with the April War. It shows that we do have serious problem indeed, exactly because the data are placed in the territory of the Republic of Armenia, because factually there have been such cases that the channels have brought to the situation that the state information flow outside Armenia was simply halted, stopped. And this has been as because of the attacks, as because of, well, for example, the April War, the Artsakh Defense Army site was not available. It was closed because the channels had not enough power to serve the number of visitors. The curiosity wave was bigger than the power of the servers were. So it was not an attack, it was just a matter of capacity. So there comes the question, what are our priorities in this respect? And I want to tell something new. A couple of days ago, I happened to see a document, an interesting document, which was received by the organizations that are providing internet connection from the Commission on Regulating the Public Services of the Republic of Armenia. And the document, by the way, is suggested to come into force from January 1 of 2020, which means in 2 months, actually. And the Commission tries to force providers actually to keep all the logs for the duration of 2 years, which I think this kind of decisions can't be made without public discussion, because let me tell you something very primitive. This will this will result in raising the prices of the internet connection. And there is also the second side, which says that it is to be defined, let me read, it is to be defined that the individuals who are providing electronic internet services, they are to keep the following information about the person who has email services. The ID card of the subscriber, in case of physical entity, a name and a second name, in case of a legal entity, the name of the company, the internet protocol, IP address, port numbers, telephone number, electronic address of the subscriber, the date, full date, up to minute, hour, day, month, year of the communication, and the type of the communication. In short, this decision is going to be make the following result. Nobody will ever want to use electronic email that is kept on the Armenian servers. I myself would encourage everybody, do not write letters on Armenian that are served by Armenian servers, because this is factually kind of scrubbing big data, which could be considered as a form of eavesdropping, because everybody understands that it's not that important to read what was written in the letter, but it's even sometimes more important to see to whom, at what time, and how many letters have been addressed by whom. And it means that we are actually in a very tough competitive field, and if the state inserts certain regulations, they have to take into account the fact that we are not on our own planet, that every regulation can simply bring to digital migration as compared to physical one, but not result in better regulation. So I told you my stories. I don't want to raise a concrete question because the issue is really quite wide. So I offer, if you think that I have missed something, or if you do not agree with me, or if you have objections, please be free to express yourselves. Thank you. When speaking about the localization of data, most probably in the first place we have to think about the goal. Which is the goal of the state when the state tries to implement such policy? Maybe there are two super goals. The first one is the privacy, secrecy, and the second one is security. And naturally there comes forward the second question, whether the localization of data is the best way to achieve these two goals. Some states think that yes, it is right to do so. Some think no. And of course there is also difference between the approaches of the states in respect of what kind of data are going to be localized. Private data, medical data, banking data, like Australia and Southern Korea, for example, they localize medical data, healthcare data, and financial data. In Russian Federation, personal data. In EU and Armenia, the approaches are more alike. Mr. Karapetyan, if he be here, he will tell you better. Our law on protection of private data in Armenia, the protection of private data, assumes more attention to the procedures rather than to where these data is kept, which is very much like the EU GDPR regulations. That's why it becomes important whether the data is processed through correct procedures, whether the security measures are kept, and whether they are being passed to a site which has enough high level of security. The Armenian approach to processing private data since 2016, and the Agency of Private Data Collection has done huge work in that respect and is still doing. The second question, the second issue, better say, is that when thinking of localization of the storage of data, we have to understand what will happen as Mr. Masterosyan said, when the data are localized. For example, the legal implementation issues are very like in such country as Russia. Russian Federation had fined Twitter and Facebook. Roskomnadzor has fined them for some mistake in data keeping. And the alternative for the population of the Russian Federation is just to avoid using Twitter and Facebook. I don't think that Armenia would like to take that road. Last year in November, we have signed this Paris Cyberspace Declaration, which assumes that Armenia is for open, mutually operational and secure internet. And we have to think of the ecosystem as well. Like, for example, by the study of the organization Leviathan have revealed that those countries where the localization of data is forced by law, these organizations, in average, from 30 to 60% do more IT expenditure than those countries where the localization of data storage is not forced. That's why we can't have just a state which is encouraging the IT sphere with the right hand and increasing the IT sphere expenditure with the left one. This much, most probably. This is the most discussed topic in the sphere of IT that we are talking about, as it was said. Maybe traditional or cloud technologies. Well, I think I should speak about the convenience of the cloud technologies. Those technologies, cloud technologies, are solving the space issues. We will have no issues of the capacity of the disks, and they solve the problem of backups. And when the traditional when you want to place a soft, you have to buy certificates. In case of cloud technologies, the purchase of certificates becomes senseless because you are paying only for the service, meaning that you don't need certificate for using a certain application because you simply buy the service in that application. And besides, cloud technologies are so convenient that you are always, always have access to the recent updates, and you are using the recent updates of any application, which is great. And besides, the cloud technologies are convenient also because many paid services are simply free of charge there, and you can just use them free of charge, and that's also great. Here comes forward the issue where these servers should be placed physically, in Armenia or outside Armenia. That's the other side of the coin of that issue. Well, so I do not have answer to it right now. The whole issue is exactly in that we raise the problem of localization, and immediately problems come forward connected with cloud technologies. In general, if you go into cloud space, cloud domain, there are so cross-border issues came forward. And my question, let me put it in with a more acute angle. Do we have issue? Meaning, do we need to demand localization by law from the point of view of privacy, security? And my second question has a more wider economic character. Do we need to encourage localization? Because it could, for example, bring to, quicker development of infrastructures, or we think that like we are a country which should not think of developing hardware, but should think of using this kind of convenient software technologies, which are the cloud technologies. Hello, my name is Gevor Kayrapetyan. I am the head of the Agency of Protection of Personal Data. Let me tell you that in the law on protection of personal data, there is no issue at all about the localization of the storage of this data. The law doesn't even touch that issue. With the same success, the law doesn't, for example, force to use iPhone, for example, or use only Android-based application or Samsung. Because, in general, in this age, there is this issue. The more the science and technology develop, the less the possibilities of protection of personal data we have. And we need to constantly change regulations. That's a fact. And from the other side, 100 years ago even, it was evident that when the tape recorders had come forward, that the science, technology, humanity is going to develop this way or that way. And that's the problem of the law, to manage not to lag behind, sometimes even through failings and bumping and falling down and so on. Because sometimes when you hurry up, you indeed stumble and had painful drops. And now the task of the laws is not to lag much behind. Okay, let it lag, but at least not more than 10 steps. In the best case, we can lag only one step. In this respect, it's more productive from the point of view of protection of the data when the parameters of protection are placed objectively. Like, for example, the law on protection of personal data says use technical and organizational measures so as to prevent the illegal interference into the database of personal data, illegal, say, storage, illegal processing, illegal breakage, illegal elimination. So each owner of the database, basing on its character, basing on its type, basing on the fact that it's electronic or not electronic, basing on their possibilities, can choose different measures and different types of measures. Someone could consider it normal that his servers are to be in Armenia because it's more convenient to manage them when they are physically in the same country. For another entity, it might be more convenient to keep the servers in a different country, in different jurisdiction, and they have to take into account whether this country where the servers are placed possess enough level of security or not. So each question will need separate, subjective approach. And for example, could be that the person or the entity thinks that they don't need to have more expenses or expenditure, or what kind of personnel to hire, how to provide the security of the physical place here or there, and vice versa. All of these issues are to be considered for each and every case. In any case, I tell you, the law says if it is going to be secret, then you do everything to keep it secret. If you have to codify it, then you have to take care all measures for codifying it. If these data are to be open and available, then think about how to make it more open and more available. In any case, the law has devised that the government can, for example, define certain requirements which kind of does not contradict to the fact that each server owner can decide on their own how strict is going to be their rules of management of their data servers. So the law, depending on the form of the law, on the legal technology, how the law has been written and what kind of terms are put before the law users, no need for that as well, because everything is very diverse. There could be data for which For example, there is the regime of availability. That is like mode of availability. Everybody can get access to this data. So you will have to think about the technical requirements of security. In other cases, like when you deal with more sensitive data, biometric data, medical data, for those with quite easy measures, the data owners or data server keepers can reach more productive, effective processing, and the law of the Republic of Armenia doesn't assume that there should be such requirements. You think that as of today we do not have any problem, any issue of regulation of this sphere? Well, no, because there is another mechanism also. There is such mechanism. If we are localizing data, what kind of load we give to the localization? It means that we do not allow cross-border flow, like so as the data would go to another country. Firstly, we have ratified the corresponding convention about the protection of personal data, which say that personal data, because of their character, should not be restricted for cross-border flow. So physically restricting the flow of data to outside the country should be justified objectively, not only just by the fact that they are personal data. Then our law has standards. It says in general do not just transfer or import personal data to a country which does not have security measures. It does not say that everything to stay in our country, but it restricts the transfer to another country, because they just specify if the country where you want to transfer this data has enough security measures. Like, for example, we have the list of 50 countries favorable for data transfer, and this definition also goes on very objective criteria. As there could be criteria for localization, there is criteria for the countries which are allowed to be transferred. Like, for example, these countries should have ratified Convention 108. The country should have an authorized body for personal data protection. Also should have corresponding legislation for providing definition of the principles of protection, solution of disputes, or if the Republic of Armenia has to transfer data to another country, then it is to be in the framework of the ratified international agreement. With these means, with these measures, and on condition of availability of these measures, they are just enough. They substitute any additional measures of restriction. Seems to me that for many countries, we are not that country which is good in protecting personal data. Sometimes when the KPD happens, we speak about other countries as well. The thing is that the law on protection of personal data is quite new. It was adopted in 2015, and before that we had another law which did not correspond to it had more declarative character. And indeed, for many countries so far, the development of the sphere of protection of personal data in Armenia is not evident, but that is changeable. That is changing. Sometimes through it is measured by personal, for example, communication. Quite recently, Armenia signed the 108 Convention Plus, which is the more updated version of the convention, but in the reality it is a quite new convention with content. It has been newly edited, and Armenia has signed that convention a couple of days ago, which is an objective criteria that could be motivation for other countries to reconsider Armenia's model. And or that body that is that committee that is acting in the framework of the convention will have from now on kind of a system of measuring the countries in respect of compliance to the convention requirements. And Although I have to say that each country decides on its own which countries to have enough level of protection for it. Thank you. Other opinions in respect of this global question? Yes, please. There was a question. Come on. No question. There is a question. Thank you. Микрофон, пожалуйста. Would you please into... Да. Thank you, colleagues. May I ask not a question, but kind of an addition to what was said? I would like to share with you a paradoxical, contradicting opinion. Look, the events of the recent days, the Sberbank of Russia was robbed of a huge number of data. Did the localization of the data help? Nope, of course. The banks are constantly losing data. Did the cloud help them? Cloud technology, did it help them? Nope, they didn't. Maybe something should be changed, like in another place of conservatoire, as Zhvanetsky would say. What do I mean? I mean, in my opinion, the task that you are discussing is security, safety of data, of access, so on. The task is not correctly defined. And in the framework of the paradigm of wrong definition of the task, we are trying to solve it erroneously from the beginning in a wrong way. Us, Eurocommission, you, everybody. What do I mean? First of all, we did not solve the issue of safety, of input, and then input of data. And then, well, yes, okay, they robbed, they stole. In respect of what the danger raises if I've been stolen of my data, in respect of certain services. But again, it is connected with the input to these services. My data were stolen, but they can't enter into those services. And so what's next? They can't do operations, of course. And the most precious things are not the data, but the operations that are done with the help of this, with the use of this data. And if we cut off the possibility of operation from the possibility of theft and robbery, then the task is put quite differently. That's what, and it's not incidental that I speak about this. Our company has thought over this topic a lot. We have even written a system that is exactly about this kind of approach. It is not allowed, or I should say, you can't make a system, in my opinion, from which you will never be robbed. You should assume that data is going to be stolen always, and create a system which won't be used, overused or exploited. That's a different placement of the task. Then the question of whether localization is needed of this data. Look, the chief question that comes forward, personalization and personification of these data. I personally do not know any document, at least in European Commission, where they would speak in this aspect about the characters of data, like personalization and personification. Although they are solving the issues of authentication, authorization, verification, and validation. Call me, name a system that would do all these four tasks together. There is none. There is no such system. Why? Because somebody names input and presentation of password and calls authorization. Somebody calls the same thing identification. Well, I started and went into the woods, but in my opinion, the topic that is being discussed should be considered from a different angle, paradoxically. And I apologize. What you said, it is kind of late. It is already in 2019. In 2 months, we are entering 2020. We should change the paradigm of consideration of all of this. And I apologize if I had touched your personal strings. Thank you indeed. Thank you very much. And in the reality, the digital situation is always pushing us into paradoxical situations. And I think that the issue here is not only the outflow of personal data, their use, exploitation, or so-called kidnap of personal data, but we have this issue of availability of data as well. If in Russia, they discuss the issue of the abstract issue of sovereignty of internet. Here we are facing a very real problem, very concrete, for example, enemy, very concrete nemesis can simply block us, can cut our internet connection, and then comes forward the availability of internal local internet, meaning to what extent we would be able to provide the accessibility of the state sites, domains, if we happen to be blocked from outside servers. And by the way, the same issue have the cellular mobile connection operators. As far as I understand, they do it not through databases localized inside Armenia. As far as I know, if the external connection communication line will be broken, then from operator to operator, the mobile connection will also be broken, lost. Meaning, from one side, these are the problems of personal data, and from the other side, if these are the issues of security, and the question is what kind of strategic approaches we should have based on this. Well, in my opinion, the National Security Council should develop this kind of strategy for and enough necessary suffice conditions to secure the availability of information in connection with extreme emergency cases. Thank you. By the law on the Security Council and by our constitution, the Security Council defines the defense policy spheres and main directions of Republic of Armenia. It's clear that information security or cyber security are to be just components of this defense policy. In the course of the last year, before other agencies also have been doing this, and since last year our agency has devised a project of the strategy of cybersecurity, in which there were also such provisions in respect about those issues that you raised, in particular about the internet channels of communication, of connection. Well, it is the having national policy on the internet security is very important, and strategy should be the first step in that direction. Unfortunately, we haven't yet adopted the strategy so far, but the work is going on. We're working on it, and the project is ready, and we're now trying to acquire opinion of experts on it. Want to add something that unfortunately I have to refer to the law on the private data protection, because I'm from that agency. But if the law allows you to refer to each aspect of protection, because the task is not placed like making this protection in certain way, but in general providing this protection. When you were making your remark, I remembered that we had such case when we had to transfer data to a country which was unable to provide security measures. And this organization that was to transfer the data was to ask permit from the agency and to provide a corresponding agreement in the framework of which the security measures would have been met, which were not available in that country. So one of the conditions was not how the data is transferred, not what kind of measures are implemented so as to prevent the kidnapping, robberies, stealth of this data. But also, even if this happens, the robbery, the stealth, to what extent or how they will be encrypted so as even in case of theft, it won't be possible to use them because they would appear like some kind of impossible to understand hieroglyphs. And that was a case that allowed us to come to encryption as a condition for allowing or permitting transfer of data. So what I mean is that logic exists also in the law and in the convention and in the GDPR, which they do not see the personal data as something secret, or because it could be also public. It might have been easier to define the rules which will regulate the form and the way of transferring this data, so that will allow not only just to prevent kind of illegal acquisition, illegal robbery or stealth of data, but also the encryption of this data, so as it won't be possible to use them in such case. Okay, a question to you. Then there is now a queue of people who want to ask questions. Thank you. My question is very short. Of course, my question is more legislative and maybe interesting for the society. Do we have such provision in the legislation of the Republic of Armenia that defines those organizations, sites, mechanisms of data collection? Do we have such provision in the law that prohibits or defines how and who has the right to get access to this personal data? First question. And basing on the answer whether yes or no will be my second question about the experience of other countries in this respect. Because now, in the society, I won't say that it's because of the lack of literacy or lack of awareness. People very, nicely, very openly, readily provide all of their data openly to anybody else. You speak of the state data, but now comes forward the question how to protect the population from illegal data collection. Is there any provision in our law? Exactly. In Republic of Armenia, a lot of organizations, in case of even providing the simplest services, they can collect any type of personal data, and their usage and further location or further exploitation, nobody knows how is going to happen. Starting from, for example, purchasing a SIM card when we provide all our data to our telephone operator, finishing with services in spa centers, in gyms, in whatever place where you are anticipating a service. Well, yes, there is such legislation, that is the legislation on protection of personal data. The only reservation that I want to make is this is about personal data, not in general data. And the law on protection of personal data is regulating exactly all the things that you just raised and gives answers to all the questions that you just gave. It defines the legality, where, in what case and when the processing of the personal data is legal. Well, I can't speak now much because it will take a couple of hours to describe everything. So at least, well, in general terms, either there is the consent, either this is the public. Well, not every nod is a consent. That is to be understood. Consent is unambiguously, voluntarily expressed wish to give. And besides, there is also this principle of correlation of processing of personal data, which means that they should be processed in that minimum amount which is necessary for certain legal goals in that period of time. And they should not be used, if it is possible, to reach the goal or destination without personification of the data. That is, the law says that the means for processing data should be useful, necessary, and measured, meaning limited. And it depends on, of course, whether these are individuals, physical individuals, legal individuals, local bodies of self-government, whoever processes personal data bears this responsibility. Sometimes the legislation on the level of secondary legislation also touches the forms of data processing, like decision of government 9192. It assumes how electronically data should be transferred between the state bodies and bodies of local self-government. Yes, indeed, we have legislation, and our legislation is rather good and progressive, because when it was adopted in 2015, there was the project of GDPR with its final version. There was the project of updated 108 convention, and our law writers took into account these new trends in the development of international laws. I absolutely agree with you at the same time that the protection of personal data is a multispectral matter. You can't look at it only through the eyes of the government. Another question is how people are using their data and what's the cost of this contact. Europe used to speak about this when people would give to these applications information about other people, other contacts they have in their smartphones without even asking these other people about the permission. Well, of course, there is also the problem of lack of awareness and lack of literacy, lack of information. And once we talked about this, I offered everybody just look in the regulations of Facebook and see what applications you have downloaded in your appliances and what tests you have passed, giving your personal data and photos. Besides the answers you give, not knowing that you are giving all your photos or your timeline posts, all your likes, your address, your age, your date of birth, electronic post address, and the information of your friends. That's indeed speaks of the lack of awareness. And we have at least had 600 people who had attended our special training courses in this respect, and majority of them are children, teenagers, and that is a task that even from early childhood people should be taught on how they are going to manage their data, whom they are with, they are going to share it. Well, the short answer is yes, the rules exist and the legislation is there. Yes, indeed, this is an issue of awareness. I remember when we were discussing this issue in the parliament, Murazan Ruben said that all of this is nothing. The personal data is used usually by the gypsies who are making predictions on your coffee mud and making kind of well, maybe I missed the joke. I have a question. You spoke about prevention, that task of prevention. Prevent of what? Prevent of leakage of information, or prevent of how this data will be used in services in future. That is a really very important nuance. Just to prevent the leakage of data, that is a task about nothing. But using the use of this data in services, that's exactly what for this task was built. But in my opinion, you are trying to solve only the first task, and you are forgetting about the task number 2. I can answer to a question very quickly. Thank you very much for the question. I would say that the answer is both, this and that. I could say that the first condition, the leakage, the leak, besides preventing the leak and besides thinking about it, our legislation shows that they think of preventing the usage of data in case of leakage. Because, as you said in your words, you said something very good. You said that we have to base our tasks on the assumption that the data shall always be stealth or robbed, because the legislation also stipulated like activities, what should be done in case of stealth by those who are those who have been robbed, meaning, and even the legislation takes into account, says that the development or processing of data creates responsibility, but not always. When the results are eliminated, when prevented, then there is no responsibility, whatever. In practice, it is impossible to give 100% guarantee that even if today you can state that nobody can steal water from this glass, then I can't give you a guarantee that tomorrow a talent, a genius won't think about using it in his favor or exploiting it. So both logics exist. Stipulating rules what to prevent the use in case of stealth or robbery does not neglect also the need for preventing the leakage as well. Both things should be done. First, we have to prevent the leakage, and if we fail here, then we should have measures and means in order to prevent the usage of the data in case of the leakage. And I agree with you absolutely in that respect. My name is Alexander. I'm from Russian Federation. That was mentioned here several times in the discussion. But my Ukrainian colleague was speaking of the personal data, and well, I want to say that preservation of the logs and the activities of the usage when the operators were we have now unlimited tariffs, and which are not necessary for average operators, and additionally, of course, these are costs. If you want very much to destroy your operators, take such legislation and they will be destroyed, because all this rhetorics on data protection has stopped the development of industry in Russia, and it is coming out of the Russian Council of Security. I hope you will not repeat our mistakes. Besides, the experience shows that European friends They are German policemen have accepted that in the whole volume of crimes, there is one or two for several thousand crimes. Russian security agencies also say when we see some big crimes, terrorism or what, they don't use the data, protected data, and never used. Maybe telephone eavesdropping is used, but the activity of internet users never is being used. Practically, it is never used in the country of defense so as to prove the innocence of your users. The only thing is that the protection of logs are only for political repressions, for stick and carrot purposes. Well, it is telling this story of colleagues where the topic is very developed. I just wanted to share that if you are going to force your operators to save to the logs, at least justify it. Unfortunately, operators are sitting there behind the wall, and we have separated ourselves. I don't know why, but this activity needs a very attentive session of the ramifications and the consequences. I hope that you won't repeat the mistake of the Russian Federation. Thank you. In the reality, this discussion is indeed very interesting. We a little bit biased from the main topic, but it only made the discussion even more interesting. A couple of words about going back to the main topic. What is about the log protection, or whether it is to be localized or whether it is to be in clouds? In the course of the recent years, actually, I have participated in several formal, not formal discussions, and I should say that there is no consensus, and there is absolute intolerance in respect of each other, of people who are expressing different opinions. So there is no answer to this question, and most probably we need a hybrid approach. It's true, from some point the channels might be broken, might be cut, and the availability of our data or availability of data from outside to us would be halted. But from the other side, there is also the contrary direction, that we could lose our data somehow here. So solutions are to be found. Now, in respect of personal data, firstly, thank you very much. We had several times a chance to discuss, and you are doing a really very important job. I think that the mandate of your agency should be expanded, because there are many functions in the protection of personal data which should be implemented in Armenia, but they are not. From the other side, seems to me that in general in the Republic of Armenia the approach to the protection of personal data is to be changed fundamentally. First of all, person should feel that these are her own data, and they should feel the responsibility for this data on their own in the beginning. So this is educational issue, this is awareness issue, and this is also legal issue. From the other side, I remember the site Elections AM, and the goal is clear. Why is this being done? But maybe the form by which it is done is not so correct. Well, in this respect, I think the following. Already for several years, this process has started. What is the status of it? Maybe I do not know or imagine, but nevertheless, those bases that exist should be unified, and the data should be kept in as little as possible places, as few as possible places. Secondly, each and every person should not only have access to his or her own personal data, but she should be able to make changes, even if in state databases. But from the other side, your functions are growing and responsibility, so as not to allow misuse of this right. People, and this is already, I suppose, a legal issue, that ultimately the responsibility for their data is their own task, because they own this data, it is their data, and they have to put the lock on this door themselves. Okay. 1, 2, 3. I suggest people, let's not have speeches. We have an exceptional possibility to ask questions. Representatives of 2, 3 state bodies sitting in front of us and ready to answer to our questions. Let's not touch the personal data. If, for example, data are in a foreign server, what difficulties does the police have to access this data? Do you imagine? It is Facebook or something else, a network, social network, and the data is there. Can police get information from this outside database? Unfortunately, I can't answer to your question because that's not my competence. I simply don't know the answer. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Saryan, the question that you raised, for that, police has several instruments, and also our law enforcing system has several instruments for receiving information, and our judiciary law formulates these rights. There are intergovernmental, international legal support measures which the police uses, and of course, yes, they can have access. Armen Bardasaryan said, my question is, any law has, even the most beautiful law, will operate in case of the system of execution, like if there is a system of punitive measures and monitoring of the implementation. Is there such a mechanism of implementation? Well, in short, it seems to me that in Armenia, the punitive part of the digital sphere is so weak that it is easier to not have any staff and lose money, or keep experts for. You can not do the law. Yeah, absolutely. You are free not to comply with the law. Well, it doesn't mean in the digital sphere. Like there was new modification in the new law that we created the agency. It was the state authorized body was created by that law, and that was one thing, which is doing control over the data and is forbidding, prohibiting, or implementing punitive measures. A second, I have to make a small data introduction. Amongst us, the number of people who have applied to us becomes twice more every year. In 2016, I was, let's not count 15. In 2016, we had 11 cases. In 17, 20 cases. In 18, 30 cases. And in 19, we already have 71 cases. If I compare with the first half of 80, I had only 6. Correspondingly, in the first half of 19, I had 38 cases, which means that people have started applying more, and they are more interested in protection of their data, which means that decisions are being made how the data is to be used, and this control and monitoring grows every year. In respect of responsibility, I would say that in the course of the history of 3 years, there has been no such case where we would need to implement any punitive measures, because the decisions of the agency were met. In exceptional cases, when they objected to the decisions, it was not that they defaulted, they just applied to the court because they did not agree. The agency said you should not process this, and it was stopped. The agency had said your data was not processed right, it should be stopped. And when we said no, it is correct, then the individual had accepted the justification. So what I mean, the mechanism and the measure of responsibility exists, and it's not that we have not used it. We have not had the need for using it, and I hope that there won't be, because actually there is no argument in the society whether it is impossible, whether it is important to protect data. From the other side, everybody is curious about the personal data of the others. But when you said that you are doing wrong, they stop doing it. That's it. My question is also about the electronic register and today's topics. My question is to the representative of the police. Well, of course, if it's not a secret, can you tell us the data of this electronic register and the election register, which includes also the electronic signature? They are kept locally or outside the country? Locally. They are kept locally. Okay, participants, I think we can wrap up. We discussed mostly personal data, and we came to a conclusion that pertinent to our topic, nothing is clear, and there is still to be discussion, a lot of discussion. Mr. Saryan, I just wanted to ask whether you know that the database of mobile network portability is on cloud, not in Armenia. Our MNP, model network portability numbers, 3-4 months ago were transferred to cloud from Armenia. Is it legal or not? Well, you mean the data which, like subscriber number figures, were taken out of Armenia into the cloud and are not physically in the territory of, well, if it is in the cloud, you can say that it is in many countries, yes, a known number of countries. You meant physically what? I can't say whether it is legal or not, because we haven't discussed it yet. And secondly, transferring personal data to other countries is not only giving this data to other countries, but also keeping it on the servers. Well, also, these are also such cases when the jurisdiction of another country starts to regulate this data. If nobody regulates, then that's okay. Armenia has lost, how to say, well, for example, if there is breakage of connection from Armenia to outside, then it turns out that our mobile operators will stop working. That's it. Congratulations. With this, let's finish, go have lunch.